Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. Thanks. And now your hosts, Ben Milton and Addy Thomas.
Apes together strong. All right. Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I am Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Certain Point of View. Today we just watched War of the Planet of the Apes with Case.
Hey, Case.
Hi, guys.
Before we get into the episode and the review, just want to remind you can go to our website, follow all our social media, Patreon, and so much more. It's all on our website, certainpov.com. Before I launch into the episode, though, I just want to take a moment because I want to dedicate this episode to somebody, someone, you know, who's special, especially to Ben and me and J. Mike. Case didn't have the opportunity to really get to know our friend Gene, rest in peace. He's a gentle soul, danced with the innocence of a child. Unfortunately, we lost him. We lost him because he decided to start working instead of and prioritize his schedule over gaming with us.
Because he liked to eat and pay his rent.
Right. And we watched the last Planet of the Apes movie with him.
That's two of them.
With him, and had some epic moments.
He was missed. He was missed big time tonight with Gene. Yeah.
We ate Nando's chicken with him before each of those movies. So rest in peace, Gene.
You bastards. You really had me going for a minute.
So now that we've memorialized Gene, who we took many moments within this movie. You've obviously missed this since you were on the other side of us.
Right, yeah.
But there were a lot of rest in peace Gene moments throughout the movie for us.
Yeah, J. Mike just kept twitching, and I guess that was because Ben was just grabbing at him, and I thought it was, just Ben being Ben, but
it was. J. Mike was also twitching because Gene was his best friend too.
Yeah.
So so there's that as well. So light-skinned brothers together. Yep. Joe Winter and Bad Ape Gene.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, this just got weird.
This just got really dark. Anyway, so getting into the actual movie.
I never laughed so hard through a movie.
Well, yes, but let's rewind real quick and say that it's War for the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, not War of the Planet of the Apes. That's right. War for the Planet of the Apes.
Yep. Now, I mean, these titles are crazy long. And
I know.
All are.
And it's hard to track. I mean, even with how many movies were there? There were 5 before.
5 of the original series.
Yeah, okay. And then of course the one we will choose to forget.
And yet we have to pay memoriam to it sometimes.
Sometimes. Or you think you'll do another past episode on that or another one?
That's the better choice in terms of just...
That's the easiest choice to go with.
The easiest choice.
Well, maybe we'll see one of those episodes
coming soon. You could do a whole
soon.
series on those movies.
I've actually, long before we linked up, I was starting to put together material to do a video essay about the franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
I kind of focused on why the Tim Burton one went so wrong. But I guess we could do a podcast.
Right.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, there you go. So we have this is a rich franchise. It has some major iconic pop culture moments from the original movie.
Oh yeah.
And there was some homage to a few not the most iconic moment, but to a pretty memorable character from the first 2 movies.
We got 2 characters.
We got plenty of references to old characters.
Cornelius.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. We did get Cornelius. Yeah, that's right. So lots of homages to the original, but outside of that, I've been enjoying this entire trilogy, and I like that they've kind of brought it to its close within the story. There are not a lot of trilogies that stick the landing well, and I personally think this one did. It was heavy-handed, but it was just as heavy-handed as the last 2 were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't tell you how much I love this franchise as a whole, in this revival trilogy in particular. This series is so damn good, and what they've done in terms of taking what we learned about the history of the Planet of the Apes from the original movies and turning it into, here's a presentation of that, where the stories and everything kind of get like muddled, but it's all true. And like even this movie was tying together some details that connect to like the larger myth that they have about Caesar in the original movies. And it's just amazing. I love this movie. I love the series. I'm so happy they did this. Like,
it was a great idea to do the prequel aspect of what we already know.
And who would ever say that?
Well, because the thing is,
as a Star Wars fan, that's
think about this. Well, the problem isn't that it was prequels; it was that it was legitimately expanding, rather than sort of this weird. Like, it wasn't slavish to its homages to the originals. Like that, there were like weird. Like in the Star Wars prequels, we have a lot of things that are like, oh, these are cringeworthy references to the old trilogy, and not really a solid story that stood well on its own.
Well, this is so distant. Like,
and you can watch these movies without watching the originals, I think, and still appreciate it.
Love them. Yeah. Totally love them.
Yeah, this is a standalone movie. Whereas like the Star Wars prequels, you're like, how do I watch this in conjunction with the other ones? You could watch this in any order, and it works fine. It actually plays perfectly if you start with Rise and work your way through, or you watch it as, I guess you could go from beneath and go back, or you could, it doesn't really matter. Like you could watch whatever order.
It still works.
Yeah.
It's a pretty impressive series and smart. Like these last three movies were really pretty smart in their storytelling. Like the directing is really good.
Was it Matt Reeves for all three or just the last two?
I know it definitely was a different director between the first one and the second.
Okay, so it's Matt Reeves for the last two.
Yeah, it's.
Who's now going to be the guy who's doing the Batman movie, the new DC.
Who just got rid of Ben Affleck's script?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, he deserves it.
Yeah.
After this.
Well, he's been talking up doing a noir Batman movie.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So like this guy, like he gets the characters. He knows. He definitely gets Caesar, and he gives a lot of nuance to Caesar. And I think that this is definitely a character-driven story, and I've appreciated that with all three of those movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see like how
I think we need to do the obligatory spoilers. Everyone should know we're doing spoilers.
Right.
We haven't done it yet, but we're about to start really going into it. And
yeah, that's true. I guess we haven't technically hit any spoilers yet.
Not yet. We've just been, I love this series. Oh, it's so good. Oh, it takes place before the Planet of the Apes.
Right.
Like, that's it. We've done all these things.
Well, and I'll also say this. It was like as much as there were a lot of homages, it didn't feel like, hey, we
fan
need
servicey.
Well, the fan service, I mean, there was a little bit of fan service, but it didn't go to the point of like, and we're going to show you how the Statue of Liberty got destroyed. That's one of those moments.
I was thinking about that.
I was actually kind of hoping, but I was like,
hoping in the past
are they
movies
going to get all the way across the country?
Yeah,
I was hoping that they were going to arrive at Las Vegas and New York.
That would have been amazing.
Because in the originals, there's a desert between them and the rest of society as well.
That would have been amazing. It would have made no sense for why they would go to Vegas to like survive without power and running water. Like that's the worst place to go. But I'm so glad
it would have been amazing. Yeah, I am too. Ultimately,
but they did heavy-handed things. Let's not kid ourselves. There were some very heavy-handed things.
But can we deal with
references? I was going to say, but references to the larger franchise were not the heavy-handed thing. Like, the Nova bit was, I laughed really loud at that.
Yes, you did. You were the only one in the theater who did.
Everybody else was just like, oh. And you just let out this huge guffaw.
Because they weren't using it so much. And it wasn't painful. And even that,
I was fine with it,
that was probably the most egregious reference, and I was still fine with it.
Yeah. It wasn't nearly as, and Jay might just pointed this out, it wasn't nearly as bad as MJ.
Yeah.
Not nearly as bad as that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of dumb. What were some of your other like heavy-handed moments then?
Well, I mean, the ending is the really heavy-handed part. And that's let's get to talk about that first.
Yeah, let's get into the imagery with this movie.
Yeah, this movie takes Caesar and turns him fully into Moses.
Yeah.
Completely. Up to the end, and like I said, spoilers, he dies before they get to the promised land.
Yeah. As he's looking out into
it. He gets one up better than Moses, because he actually gets to enter the promised land. Moses,
sort of. He doesn't actually go into it. Like he's sitting
on
the mountain looking down on it.
Looking into it.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Moses.
We're not, like, are we going to split hairs about how you're staging Moses sitting down and dying before entering the promised land?
Moses didn't get a chance to see the people playing in the promised land. There's a difference. They hadn't crossed the River Jordan yet, man.
It doesn't matter. like they hit the reference. They also had like a spilling stone of liquid. In this case, it was gasoline that he turned into fire.
Yeah.
But
and he broke the rock.
They really take the apes and like actually put them through this like work metaphor, which is very much like and they're building a mount or building a wall at a
slave
fortress.
labor.
Yeah, it's very slave labor.
Well, and I thought that was a good thing, especially you're talking about the mythology of the originals. You know, we hadn't seen the apes as slaves.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that exact thing, and it's nice that they did that. I'm fine with them in Rise being test subjects and whatnot. Like they are working for humankind, and I think Rise created a better question where it's like, oh God, are we actually slave drivers? And we don't even see it because of the way that we treat them. It's not just like chattel slavery, but it's still slavery of a form. Like they either are minstrels in cages, or they are test subjects for viruses and things, or they are actually being trained for tasks. Like that is a real thing that down the line, centuries later, you could tell the tale and it sounds like, oh yeah, they had us working in the fields and so forth. So I did like Rise being a little more subtle in that regard, but this is not a huge issue there. Like this is probably like 3 or 4 days of them being in that scenario. Yeah. Like they're not all dying of lack of water at that point. So like
they get close to it. That's
like it's maybe a week of slavery.
But
like,
you do get some of the warriors like crucified.
Yes.
So.
Which also set up stuff that happened in the original Planet of the Apes, like that. Like those crucifixes are out there when they're like wandering around. Do we want to talk about the big reference to the Planet of the Apes?
Sure.
Like the lack of talking because of the virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. The fact that it actually prevents them from talking, but definitely does not prevent them from being intelligent.
Right.
Was interesting because it shows how we perceive people who can't talk as being dumb, and how they become apes to the humans' eyes just as much as like even apes who are smart being still seen as animals.
It's less than
and then it also gets into the issue that cognition in itself needs to be conveyed through language, and if you have a race of people who can't speak and who never really develop sign language and don't adapt to it,
get that higher
like all the people who are like cut off from who never learned sign language in the first place and are completely cut off, like in a few generations they might completely run out of language.
Yeah, and actually that kind of leads to one of the things that well, actually before I get to that, Ben, tell us what you kind of thought of the movie and its I guess themes and some of that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty well covered it. I think that like as much as I talk about and I love like religious themes, still at the end of by the end of the movie, I was like, okay, I fucking get it. He's Moses.
You just wanted a big musical number, spiritual.
Kind of really did, yeah.
Well, him being Moses and being Charlton Heston right there.
Right?
At the same
I just
time.
needed the red and black robe.
Yeah. Like by the end, I was
he
like,
was shot
okay.
earlier, and like they're not quite clear on like how long it goes. And I figure that like that arrow was poisoned, which is why he like still died, because like it had to be a couple days of travel.
I mean, he was still bleeding.
Yeah, like if it was poisoned and that's why the wound didn't close. Okay, cool. If because of that he was limping and had to use like a big stick as a cane.
Oh, that would have been
fucking amazing.
That would have been. I really want that now.
I kind of would. Yeah, like either
with the
go
red
completely
like the blood like
dripping down
onto his
into
fur.
that pattern.
Yes.
Yeah, and for some weird reason his hair grows longer, so it looks really flowy.
I liked even sort of the the little specks of gray that they had in it.
They aged him, and they
said it was 15
really
years from the outbreak of the virus, and so he was pretty young in the first movie, like as a character. Even though I think he's like maybe 15, like by the end of that movie. So we're talking these 30 apes typically live about 40 years.
Well, but then let's also add into this. You also have something that made them achieve sentience. So
it doesn't matter. Like apes typically, like the lifespan of a chimpanzee or a gorilla is in the 40-year ballpark.
Okay.
So he's getting up there, but they're in their prime pretty close until they die, because that's how animals work. Like most animals don't have the luxury of being decrepit.
Yeah. Well, the two changes I really noticed were Caesar and his age, but Rocket apparently went on P90X.
Rocket's biceps were fucking jacked. I even whispered to J-Mike about that at one point, because there's a chase scene and they all hop on horses except Rocket's has been stolen, so he jumps on Luca the gorilla's horse, and I whispered to J-Mike, of course, we put the two heaviest ones on one horse together.
This poor horse is dying. Just dying.
To be fair, Maurice takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, I mean, Maurice is big, but Maurice is not gorilla big.
Yeah,
but Maurice also has Nova at that point in time.
He has a little child as opposed to a fully grown alpha male.
Gorilla and chimpanzee.
Yeah, no, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
But
Like, let's remember, Rocket in the first movie was the giant ape that beat up Caesar a lot before he became smart and was like, oh shit, what was I? I was a dick. I'm sorry.
So my bad.
Exactly.
My bad, man. My bad.
And I love that actually about Rocket. Like the fact when
arc is
Rocket
good.
first shows up, I'm like, I'm so happy that they took that character who could have very easily been just an antagonist in the first movie and had him become a trusted lieutenant both in the first movie and then into the second one, and they continue to be close friends. Like that shows this relationship with the characters that you would not expect them to do.
Which is something I actually like early on in the movie when they decide to like kind of whittle down like the crew that you're kind of watching to just Caesar, Luca, Maurice, and Rocket. Like that, I think that
sort of.
Yeah.
Like I get what you're saying in terms of like it makes it easier to track who's around there, but like the thing is they never had to worry about that in either the other movies because they did that same thing. It just they had other apes around them, but like in the first movie, sub Luca out for Buck, and I kept thinking in my head that Luca was Buck too, which he was also in Dawn, where it just there's all of a sudden a gorilla that's a trusted lieutenant of Caesar's as well, which makes sense. But okay, cool, it's just playing the same role. But you had Rocket, you had Maurice, and you had Buck in the first movie, and then the second movie, it's the same thing plus Koba who betrays them. Like it's never an issue of them having too many characters who you can really pay attention to.
No, but in this movie, it could have easily gone that direction because you start out like with all of the apes, and having them break
one before that too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they didn't. I'm just saying that it was. You're right. It was a good move. It made the pacing of the movie work a little bit better. It made it a lot smoother.
Well, it lets you focus in on the characters a little bit.
Yeah, and get those moments. Yeah,
because I think those character moments are what again helps set this franchise apart.
Well, it helps humanize those characters.
And another thing that I also liked about this movie, you know, we were getting a lot of like, you know, this is, you know, action drama. I guess you can kind of categorize this as. Would you categorize it more drama or?
It's an action flick. It's a summer. It's a
I
summer
wouldn't call it an
popcorn
action. I wouldn't really call it an action flick. I would go more sci-fi drama that has action elements.
Yeah,
which is characteristic of the Apes franchise in general. Like the fight scenes have never been like the keynote thing.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I will say that what I was sort of getting to is the fact that this is a serious one, like with moments of levity. And as much as I love the Marvel movies and you know what we have with Star Wars and a lot of superhero stories is you know they're definitely moving with few exceptions to more humor, which is great. But it's nice to also have an action movie this summer that's good. That's also a little bit more serious and has that also still has very good character development as well.
And is very thoughtful. I think that's the bigger thing about the Apes franchise in general. Like it's always been so deep, even going back to the originals with like the very thinly set up racism analogies. But like with this, they take their time and they think always throughout the entire franchise, and that's what I love about the series.
It's rare in movies in an industry where Michael Bay is making movies.
Yes.
It's nice to have somebody actually putting some thought into your characters, your plot, your world. And it all actually makes sense. Like there's very few things where I'm just like, okay, like I don't understand why that happened. Right. Like they explain everything that needs to be explained. They don't introduce a lot of plots that just kind of go nowhere or never resolved. Like everything kind of fits together really nicely.
And the plots don't get so dense as to lose the emotional core and original truth of it as well.
Yeah.
So
it's a pretty impressive trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it. I laughed hard. I laughed so hard.
Steve Zahn is great as Bad Ape. Like,
Bad Ape.
When I heard that he was being cast as an ape, I was like, I'm not really sure about this casting choice. And then I saw some clips of it, and like just some clips, devoid of context. I was like, I don't know about this guy. It's like it might be like this might be the shark that we're jumping right here. Like, what's going on? But he's great. Like
that character's
fantastic.
This, like,
broken character who has no one to talk to, is kind of crazy and can't relate to his own kind because he's been so isolated from them. It's great.
Yeah,
like it's
fantastic.
Such a perfect character and a thing we were missing. Like the biggest issue you could say about the other apes in the other apes in this trilogy is that they have too much of cohesion. Like they have too much of a culture, and you kind of like lose them sometimes, and that's why it's good that we whittle down or at least focus on certain apes because it easily becomes just a lot of background characters. But man, we have not had someone else who felt like a fish out of water with the apes like context, Caesar did in the first movie. And like and even Caesar has lost that status. He can talk a little better than the others, but he's so part of their society that he doesn't feel separated. Bad Ape is just great to have.
He's a lot of fun. He is a lot of fun. He had so many great lines.
Yeah.
Anytime he was on screen, it was
deliveries.
just genius. Yeah, it was genius. Steve Zahn was fantastic.
Like, who saw that coming?
I mean, I like Steve. He's not bad. I mean,
but you don't think
I don't ever go, oh, I want to see a Steve Zahn.
I want to see a Steve Zahn mocap piece.
I wouldn't have guessed it, but, you know, it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're praising the franchise as a whole, especially this trilogy, and like this movie is just such a well executed part of this series. Like it's hard to really even focus on. Like because I just want to talk about how like the one time I watched Dawn with all the subtitles turned off by accident, and I was like mesmerized just by watching apes do sign language with each other. Like this has been such a great franchise. I can't get over it.
Yeah, it is impressive. I wish that Star Wars made movies like this.
I will say this is not a perfect movie though.
What are the things that stood out to you?
I was thinking throughout, once they got to the slave camp, I was like, okay, I'm enjoying a lot of the symbolism and I'm enjoying them being like actual slaves and working and whatnot. But it did occur to me that this was hitting third movie syndrome, where they are acting out story beats from the first one and kind of sidestepping the stuff from the second one. The same way Return of the Jedi is set like around a Death Star, the same way that Alien 3 is about a single alien chasing them after the first one is that, and the second one's a big squad. Like it's going back to the first movie's roots in order to set up these like Dark Knight Rises. Like we're all of a sudden dealing with League of Shadows. It doesn't really relate to Dark Knight. It really relates more to Batman Begins.
Right.
And this movie had a very similar structure. Like you could almost ignore Dawn. It's great for character development, but in terms of the actual story, you could completely ignore it.
Yeah.
And it would still make sense. Like if you just watch the first and then this one.
Yeah.
And then you get those same story beats. Like Caesar is stuck inside a prison of some kind. We get to deal with like a prison break kind of scene. And that's the big threat that they're under, like getting free, getting clear, which is not the issue in Dawn.
Only reason I disagree with that a little bit is, and I don't know if I'd apply this to Star Wars necessarily. I think you can, but Koba's influence on this movie is really significant. I don't think, like, yes, the plot structure is the same, but the point that Caesar is at is heavily influenced by his experience with Koba. The whole idea of ape shall not kill ape, how to deal with humanity.
Yes,
and those are
important scenes, and this is all big character development. Yeah. But I'm saying, like, if you cut those little pieces out that are direct references and require you to know the information of the second movie, like, it would still make sense.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you, the audience member, would be like, oh, he's consumed by rage. Clearly, he had some sort of analog or antagonist that, like, that were facing him against. Like, it would just be his own rage has consumed him. Like, it would make sense storyline-wise.
Right, but I think that's one of the things that lends that sort of that emotional truth to it, that gives it a significant character arc for Caesar.
Yes, and I'm not saying that I don't love Dawn, and I think Dawn is a great movie, and like I go back and forth on which, at least of the first two, that I prefer. I'm not going to weigh in on this one yet, but Dawn is a great movie, and I'm not trying to dismiss the second movie in third movie syndrome or say that there's no impact of the second movie on a third movie. I'm just saying that sometimes you end up in a scenario where the third movie is just a do-over of the first one, even if there's like, now we're seeing them in a different set of circumstance or like a different emotional state because of the second one. The second one, in this case, I mean, just like how Back to the Future 2, like, they have a little more power of action. They're free to travel around. Yeah. Back to the Future 3 goes back to them being trapped, but now they've learned lessons from 2. Right. Like, that's what I'm saying with the movie.
It's
like,
sort of, and I think that's what when you talk about third movie syndrome, I sort of see it more as, well, now these characters have had some, life-altering, something that's altered their lives in the second installment, so they're sort of facing the test from the first, their original test almost again. To see how they're going to go with this, and this one of the things that also, again, I think expands out and makes this a little bit more rich in story is also the the splintering again. Like I'm coming back to Koba, but I think I also kind of want to bring it to sort of thematically some of the big things. Like you have, of course, the Moses imagery, and I mean, Ben and I both said, suckers for religious imagery. So I'm totally on board for that. But I also thought that it didn't rely so heavily on that it didn't forget sort of the other overall theme for this entire trilogy about the sort of the role of nature kind of fighting back against what humanity was trying to do by controlling it. That was pretty, like, that was definitely really evident in a lot of in the dialogue from Woody Harrelson's character. And then of course with the whole the subplot with humanity losing its speech with the evolution of the flu.
Right, and them trying to fight back against it by killing the infected members, and still they get infected and whatnot.
But then,
side note, the second the doll was like left in the cage, it was like they're all going
gonna die.
They're going mute. Like you knew it. The second he picked it up, you're like, yep, that was it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But then, like, to finish that also with sort of an avalanche, not only like in both a Moses way of like the Red Sea coming back and killing Pharaoh's army, but also for like nature fighting back and completely wiping out and like sort of like a complete blank slate, creating a blank slate from all that devastation and heartache and all that, like that, a slave camp right there completely wiped out. I thought that was well thought out. I don't think that was by accident. I definitely don't think it was by accident. But it also goes to a third
movie point where they survive by being up in the trees, which is their like salvation at the end of the first movie.
That's right.
Like there's no reason they all are like, let's climb the trees. They just do.
Yeah.
And that's sort of seen as their symbolic like breaking free of humanity. Like they in the same way. And again, this is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Like there are bad movies. The bad movies are the third movies where they don't learn any lessons of the second movie. Like where they're just doing the same story as the first. Like good ones have the characters grow, and this one is a great one.
Yeah.
Like everyone has grown so much and has learned so much. Like I'm just saying, like structurally, this is a thing that I caught while the movie was going on. Like there's a few tired points. Like when Caesar's wife and son die, I knew someone was about to die. I thought it was going to be Rocket. They even call out like, make sure Rocket's with you.
Yeah.
Because in my head I was thinking, they're not going to kill his wife. Like that's so cliche, especially after she was like out of action for the entirety of Dawn because she was like bleeding from pregnancy.
Yeah.
I just thought it was going to be a tired story beat, and they killed him, and it still felt tired. Like if it had been Rocket, if it had been Maurice, I didn't think they would kill Maurice, but like.
If they would have killed Maurice, I would have
rioted.
rioted.
Anyone they could have killed, and he could have had the same driving point,
now.
or as long as it was one of his like close people. And it bugged me that they went for like, oh, your wife and son. Okay, like
yeah, but they made it pay off with Woody Harrelson's story. I agree with you. Like when it happened, I was like, oh, okay,
it's
cliche. But then you get the payoff moment with Woody Harrelson talking about killing his own son, and that's sort of being the impetus to Caesar's redemption and of forgiveness and breaking the cycle of hate. So like I agree. Like it is cliche. It is tired. But they kind of redeem it in that third
right.
act.
But the movie before also dealt with a lot of those same things, with Gary Oldman's character being driven by the vengeance from his
daughter,
and then also actually with Rocket. Like there's a whole point about like Rocket wanting vengeance early in the movie, and like Caesar is the one who holds him back.
Right.
Like, and I get you can make the argument. Okay, so Caesar's the one who's actually dealing with it in the moment, and he's way more tested and worn down than Rocket was there. And again, this is showing there's great character growth. The fact that there's a story beat that has been done and they handle it well is not a thing that like removes the movie from consideration.
Right.
It's just a point that I'm making is
it's a piece of crap. Well, I mean, without beating a horse to death, like I think all three of us loved the movie, right?
It's fantastic.
Ape to death. I'm surprised you didn't go with that.
Beating an ape to death?
Apes together. Oh, well, no. Oh, right. I forgot what you were doing. I don't know why you'd be watching. You'd get it if you were watching the movie,
video.
but I don't know why you'd watch this.
Movies, because that's been a thing since Rise.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it ever showed up in the first five, but
it's the best.
Yeah, I
love that.
Man, they did such a great job with this franchise. Like this is sort of like Dawn is also kind of a remake of Battle for Planet of the Apes, and this is also kind of like they basically split the story over two. In this case, they actually have like freaky humans who worship the Alpha Omega thing. Like,
yes.
the tie-ins to Beneath, like, that was great. I love that part there.
I like for a moment I thought like when he was questioning what are they building, it's like I hope they're not building a nuke. You know,
I was thinking there's probably a nuke buried somewhere in the basement, but then they blew up the mountain.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and also it's on the wrong coast.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. Like it was great to have that reference there, and like, oh man, so good.
Well, at least they didn't go for like they had already developed telepathy right then and there as well.
Yeah, I was thinking they're all shaving their heads, and it would have been cool if they all like super shave their heads, like as a way of being like, we're not apes, we're completely devoid of hair.
of it.
Like if he had shaved his face, everything like. I mean, Woody Harrelson, who looks great considering how old he's got to be now.
Yeah.
Like, he's still playing like a military action hero character or action villain character.
And pulling it off.
Yeah. Like, wow. You can't see Frasier doing that.
No. Well,
wait, we haven't talked about the donkey thing.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that is worth talking about.
Big,
like, it was a really cool point. Like the turncoat apes that were serving them, they all got called donkey. It was sort of an interesting element to a bunch of the characters, and of course you knew that the one who eventually redeems himself at the end would have that moment. You could just feel it.
Well, you should know it as soon as you see, like, the first time you see him and they're attacking the apes, and like he's looking over, watching all the apes die and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like,
but I loved it. I thought that was a really cool detail. I felt annoyed that they killed or that they used the one visually interesting gorilla in the
Winter.
group. Yeah, to be like yet another turncoat, but.
Yeah.
It's okay because this movie, unlike Dawn, remembered that there's different types of apes. In Dawn, it's like just chimpanzees, except when they need a gorilla to be strong, or Maurice.
Right.
In this case, there's orangutans everywhere, and including orangutan children, and that was great.
Yep.
And there were gorillas more frequently, as opposed to just occasionally we need a bunch of big ones.
Yeah.
Like, this movie had like a much greater diversity, which they've been lacking since Rise. Like, Rise had strategic uses for all the apes.
I want to say this is like the Wonder Woman of ape movies. This is the first time we just got like a really good, diverse,
a really strong ape
leading
role model. You mean you get the third movie of this?
And so that was a cool story point, and it was also the first time we got the first point where the I don't remember the name, if they ever gave a name for that gorilla who was like the main turncoat gorilla.
Donkey.
They
called him Donkey, but like. That was the first time we got a good close-up on an ape, and man, does the CGI look good now. Like,
yeah, it does.
Like, Rise, you could tell, like, there was no question there. And Dawn, they were looking good, but you could still see the CG. I could not see the CG in this movie for the most part.
I was looking for it. Like Maurice, the close-up of Maurice's face.
Oh, my God.
Unbelievable. Holy smokes.
Well, did you see that promo video, the one where it starts with Andy Serkis, like, giving a speech as Caesar, and it like morphs into him as
in the mocap suit.
Yeah.
I saw stills from it. I didn't watch the whole video. For that.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Maybe we'll share.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing these things like this stuff with Andy Serkis doing this cool mocap stuff for years, but man, the textures, like everything has gotten so good now. And maybe part of it's also we were watching this in 3D, so maybe on a 2D field you might see some of the edges a little bit more. Whereas in this case, things are purposefully popped out.
Yeah.
So maybe that was helping mask some of it, but still, it just looked great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let us know what you think of the movie. You can go to our website, certainpov.com. All our social media is there. While you're there, you can check out Patreon if you want to be a part of what we do on the podcast, along with all our with our social media and Weight Loss Civil War. Again, certainpov.com. And until next week, stay scruffy, my nerf herders. Apes together, strong.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Head over to certainpov.com.